from that, preventing that runoff from getting into creeks and waterways. We did stream crossings in forestry areas, access roads, and renovation and culverts in some of the forestry and rangeland settings. Next slide. And I think we're going to probably hold questions till later.
Yeah, that way we can get the other presentations in. So if we can do that, appreciate it.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair Marcus and board members. My name is Sam Ziegler, and I manage the Watersheds Office in the Water Division at US EPA, Region 9. Let's see, you just have a little clock to keep me going short, hopefully. Thanks to you and your staff for including us on this agenda item. And I think from what we've heard already from Johnny and Alan, it's quite exciting in terms of some of the progress that we're making. Coordination with USDA and the state water quality restoration programs is a high priority for EPA. It's a top priority for a variety of reasons, including because agriculture is a leading cause of water quality impairments nationally and in California. And our efforts to demonstrate progress in restoring waters impaired by agriculture, as well as other sources, as you know, have been limited and are still in need of improvement. Next slide, please. Funding provided to the states under the Clean Water Act, Section 319, is certainly too limited and decreasing, maybe decreasing as we're speaking, to adequately address the problems. And historically, EQIP funding and other USDA cost share programs have been much more robustly funded. So we need to work together to address this problem if we're really going to achieve the goals that we've set out for ourselves. In California, both the water boards and NRCS have cutting-edge efforts underway and deserve much credit for making progress to address these challenging water quality issues. Along those lines, water board programs such as financial assistance for non-point source controls have been coordinated in some way, shape, or form with EQIP funding and other USDA funding for probably at least 20 years that I'm aware of. But there's room for improvement there. And we still face many challenges to achieve our water quality goals. This initiative we're talking about today can be helpful, particularly if we use it to learn to do a better job and apply these lessons to a much higher percentage of EQIP funds, not just the 5% covered by the National Water Quality Initiative. Some of what we need to learn to do better, and I think that's some of why Johnny brought us here today, is to better utilize regulatory and non-regulatory programs together to achieve our goals. These goals aren't going to be addressed through reliance on either one or the other. It really does take a unified, integrated approach that merges these two programs. Next slide, please. We are moving from opportunistic, what could be called opportunistic funding, to performance-based funding. Funding where assessments and plans such as TMDLs and watershed plans guide our investments. In this new paradigm, our plans are investment strategies to ensure a good return on public as well as private investments in water quality. We are also developing mechanisms and tools to help make better funding decisions based on these plans. This includes being able to track progress towards improving water quality and implementing TMDLs, and to daylight this information in a way that's easily accessible to the public while we make the most of our all too limited monitoring resources. So in closing, let me reiterate that my appreciation for the efforts and good working relationships we have with the water boards and NRCS. This initiative is a good opportunity to continue to work more closely and differently with each other. And for me, a success measure will be the extent to which the initiative helps us make better funding decisions, better investments that result in documented progress towards restoring impaired water quality in these initial watersheds and others. And I think the point is really we need to take lessons and apply it in other places. So with that, thank you again, and Valentina is now going to describe some of our work in the Salt River watershed.
I'm Valentina Cabrera, and I work in the Watersheds Office at EPA with Sam. Thank you. So I'm going to chat a little bit about what we're doing in the salts, where we have a collaborative monitoring effort going on, where the agencies are coming together, and hopefully some years from now we'll have useful data that will show what we've done here. Don't want to get anyone too prematurely excited, since so far there's 1 year worth of data. Anyone who knows anything about monitoring can tell you that's not really a story yet. So the Salt River, as was mentioned by Alan, was selected 2 years in a row for funding, and so there's been a lot of focus there. It is the second highest sediment yield for a watershed, I think per area basis in the world. So there's a major sediment problem.
How can that be? Why is that?
My understanding is that it is young sediments recently uplifted from the ocean bottom before time and pressure turned them into rocks, and so easily erodible soils.
Also, let me add to that, is that they set up some prisms early on that they thought would be beneficial for the whole area in general, but they didn't recognize that the natural tide was a scouring of the sediment that was built up that moved it out to the ocean. So when they cut that off, there wasn't any scouring left, and so the sediment just completely built up. And so now it's trying to undo something that was done. And well, I'll just stop with that.
So, quick question. So what is the highest sediment yield in the world?
That's a good question.
Oh, I don't know.
Or something? Wait,
I'd have to go look in the report and come back with a number, but I don't have that on the top of my head. So So in this area, there's been a focus for many years by many agencies, but also with a more water quality focus, there have been total maximum daily loads written here for temperature and sediment. So part of what we're hoping to do with this monitoring effort is, one, see how we're doing with the National Water Quality Initiative, but also how are we doing on those TMDLs that were established years ago. I got a few pictures of the kinds of projects that were put in place. Things like dairy roofs keep manure from getting into the local creeks. Here's the guy that owns that roof. Here's Johnny. Who's that guy? This is right upstream of one of our sampling locations that we've selected, where you can see there's some hoof prints along the stream bank, and there will be a fencing project going in. And this is a bridge, I think you have a long shot of it in your slides, Alan, where the bridge was replaced from another structure that was falling apart, and then there will be fencing that goes in. So also keeping the cows out of the creek, and almost immediately downstream of this is one of the other sampling locations. This is the Salt River watershed again. I should have probably mentioned it is a tributary to the Eel River. It comes in a little bit before it hits the coast. And here where we have the yellow push pins are the locations where we have selected to do some long-term monitoring. I say long-term, but obviously we've got 1 year of data so far. We're hoping to go back as long as we can on a yearly basis and see what kind of trends we find. It's always hard to promise anything when EPA doesn't have a budget, and nor will we know what the budget would be 5 years from now, but this is our intention. With things like sediment, it's always tricky to say how things are changing over time without having some kind of a continuous monitoring, because a lot of the sediment comes down pretty quickly during storms. And so unless you capture all the events, it's hard to see what's going on. So one of the things we're going to do is install this lovely piece of equipment on Russ Creek and in the fall, so we have yet to do it. but it's coming. And one of the things that it will tell us via its cell phone connection is what the turbidity is at any time, and then every once in a while it'll take an automated sample when the storms are coming, and fortunately we do have a nice cooperative partner there, and the local RCD person who's funded with NRCS money to help us out with this will be shipping samples off to the lab so that somebody from EPA doesn't have to drive 5 hours to pick it up. Instead, somebody can drive 15 minutes and drop it in the mail to us. The things we're going to look at while we're out, I'm not going to read this incredibly long list, but generally speaking, we've heard dairies a few times. There are a lot of cows in this watershed, so bacteria is of high interest. We're going to look at nutrient and sediments. And then to give an indicator sort of overall stream health, we are going to be looking at macroinvertebrates, which sort of giving you a yearly bug count gives you a good sense as to how things are going overall. And then I threw this slide in here because I thought there is no better picture for collaborative monitoring than this. What you're looking at is a person from the RCD who, as I mentioned, gets some funding from NRCS to participate, collecting a sample. I'm there, EPA. Johnny's there, so you got State Board. So this is our kumbaya. All the agencies are working together to make this happen picture. And then I will end with the next couple of shots because I couldn't help but embarrass my boss in public. This is Sam collecting a DO measurement.
Thank you.
Okay, we have the next slide. And so Region 4 was going to be here but couldn't make it because of other TMDL work issues, so they asked me to present theirs for them. And I work closely with both of these projects. And so I just wanted to kind of highlight the main emphasis here in that the partnership between the agencies and the stakeholders came into play. And we can see this here with this particular presentation. Next slide. And so what had to happen was the Irrigated Lands Program was going on its regular routine in collecting its information, but in the Cayugas Creek with the National Water Quality Initiative, it kind of formalized the agencies to really address it. And so we were able to circle it and really kind of pull people together and start to look at what we can do to help these folks not only improve water quality, but comply with the regulatory program. And that's the link that I see here. Next slide. It's not easy to build the relationships in an area where it's being regulated. People are afraid of regulation, and you know, we had to kind of cross that bridge to show that there is indeed impairment. We have a lot of pollutants in the area. It's like 400 square miles, and there's a need to address it. So once the folks recognize that we're there to help them to address the issue with our partners, it kind of opened the door. I knew it would, and I finally saw it. And next slide. And once we got the group together, we started, opening things up and recognizing what had to be done, and very much pulled in the stakeholders to try to be part of the equation and part of the model that they would take ownership in. And that's what I was waiting to see, if we could really do that. Next slide. And so the data clearly showed that, while the National Water Quality Initiative focuses on nitrates and nutrients and sediment, we could see that we did in fact qualify there because it was in the monitoring data that the Irrigated Lands Program and other programs pulled together. The other criteria that I didn't think was mentioned to fit the National Quality Initiative was a need to be by the 303D, and I think Alan did mention that. There had to be a robust monitoring program, and that's where the Irrigated Lands Program came in, because we had that structure already there, and also strong stakeholder support. So they had started that enrollment process, and really the upfront regulatory side of things is very bumpy, but I believe that once you get through that process, the back end of it is you get people finally recognizing that they need to work together to solve a problem. You're not going to get to this point unless you go through that process of a regulatory shadow being in place. Rest of the country is voluntary with regards to agriculture and the regulation of agriculture, and I don't see the same type of collaborative effort with that regulatory shadow that kind of moves everybody, necessarily so, because there's backlash if you don't comply with the regulatory agencies. We don't like to show that, but to see them recognize it and then move through the bumps to the other side, and that's what these two projects, I think, did. Next slide. Here is the Cayugas Creek National Water Quality Initiative perimeter, and you can see the light yellow ones are all the ag-dominated areas, and so it's a very good project to be able to set up monitoring, to see right where the streams are, the impaired streams. We know it's all ag-related, and so it was a very nice fit, and hopefully we can continue to find others that can fit the model. Next slide. And so what happened was the need, as we said, for that collaborative effort. Not all agencies are the same. We don't get a lot of cooperation from all the RCDs or all the ag commissioners or all the farm bureaus, but in this case we were able to get that. And so that's what I'm looking for in future projects, is where can we find that cooperation and get these models to fit. And so they did that here. Region 4 was outstanding in their collaborative effort with these other agencies. Next slide. And here, when I first went to Region 4, I don't know, Tom, if you went with us or not for the fees, but there was a lot of defensive posture, and they really didn't want to be regulated, which is typical for the upfront part of it. But now when I went back there with this project, all we did was stand back and let the growers take ownership and really were telling us what worked, what didn't work, what they tried, where they put the funding, and that the Farm Bureau person's on the left there holding that chart, and there's a grower and consultant on the right, and the rest of them are all growers in the area, and they actually collaborate of what's working and what's not working. I thought that was very interesting. Next slide. The RCD was instrumental in coming in and showing techniques on how to measure nutrients. These are all working growers in the area, so they have that relationship on how they can address issues. And they provide funding as well, so that the growers can take what they're learning and put it out in the field. And again, that satisfies the regulatory requirement of, I believe it's 8 hours of education out of the waiver. So you can see how you can fit one to the other. Next slide. And so in conclusion, I wanted to just show that the agencies can work together. It's a must that the growers are plugged in and they recognize the problem, and the third-party certification programs can be developed and evolved to be another partner, so that all of these show a success in that we work together to get a project done. Now, Tam always hits me on, show me performance. And performance is measured in different ways. Obviously monitoring, and we're getting there. We're setting these up. You saw the maps, and we do think that we're going to start seeing some of these improvements, because they're all kind of putting their money where their mouth is in terms of the practices. So we just now need to let that go and develop and then get the monitoring. But another success that I saw in the salt, at first I didn't agree with Alan to pull the salt in because there's no ag there. In my mind, ag is commodities, vineyards, orchards, that type of thing. But organic dairies, free grazing dairies, I didn't quite see where it would fit the irrigated lands program. But what I did see is the model. All of these guys were working together amazingly. We didn't get a chance to see the slide, but there was a lot of ownership where we met with several people in the area. They presented everything to us. They gave us a great history of the Salt River, and they remember what it looked like before the sediment, right? And so they really took that ownership because they want to see that in the future. And so the agencies can just provide that help to get them there. So that's the model that we'd like to get. Next slide. And so it does work. It can work. The model is cast. We just now need to take that model and move it into other regions. And so that's what we'd like to try to do with the support of those agencies. And, you know, where does everyone fit? Where are the roles? And what degree of support will these different agencies kind of come together and do this? So with that, we're done, and answer any questions you might have.
I just make a quick comment. I appreciate the presentations. It's all right to spend a lot of time, even in a state of 163,000 square miles, looking at 4,000 acres, but but it's a good example of federal, state, local landowners, you know, finding a way to work together and get results. So, really want to encourage this collaboration. It's wonderful to see NRCS and EPA working together in their collaborative and their common goals. So I just would acknowledge what Sam says. You know, we're learning to do better. You know, I think the state board in its actions has shown that too. We're going to see some of that in today's agenda in terms of we're looking at, you know, how we're performing. And just wanted to highlight this idea, the team concept, and how important it is moving forward in really all of our programs because we really share so many common mission objectives. So thanks for making the presentation today. And finally, you know, want to see some farm bill money put toward water quality and water resources in California. Thank you.
That's great. I agree with that. Thank you all. It's great to see you together, and I really like that you're focusing on a few given places where we can see some results, and hopefully that'll grow and create models. And I hope you seem like you're having fun working together, and that's important too. So thank you. Next, item 6, the fiscal year 2012-2013 annual performance report. Eric and Rafa. Sorry to have to run on that. That was great, but we have a heavy agenda, so.
Morning, Chair Marcus, members of the board. My name's Eric Oppenheimer. To my left is Rafa Maestu, and to his left is Robert Anderson. Rafa and I are with the Office of Research, Planning, and Performance, and Robert's with the Office of Information Management and Analysis. This item is presentation of the 2012-13 Annual Performance Report, which is our web-based online report that shows the work that we've achieved over the last year, our progress toward meeting the targets that we set at the beginning of the year, and to some extent, and an increasing extent, the result of our actions on actual water quality improvement. Just some key points on this year's report. It is the 5th year that we've produced the report. It is innovative in state government. We're not aware of any other state agency that's got a report that's so comprehensive and transparent in reporting our performance and progress over the year. We've got a lot of recognition for it. In 2012, the Delta report card actually pointed us out as a model for performance management in the Delta and recommended other state agencies follow suit and do something similar. We've been case studies for the Performance Management Council. We were written up in a Stanford Woods Institute case study on performance management. Actually, they had some negative things, for lack of a better word, to say about it, and that, you know, that we were too focused on outputs and not enough focused on outcomes. And they said, for example, that TMDLs should be judged not on how many permits you get out, but on actually how water quality is improving. And as we go through the report, you'll see that we took that advice or input to heart, and we are doing that. The report's growing. It's continuing to improve. The graph on the slide there shows that when we started out 5 years ago, the report was built off 37 what we call report cards. Now we're up to 229. That's good. That's also bad. It's good in that we're covering, you know, we're more comprehensive in the report. The negative part of it is we're putting a lot of information out there, and we, you know, possibly are suffering from information overload. mentioned that it's developed internally. We don't have any consultants working on this, and the reason that's up there is because it's the type of thing that you've got to do yourself. It doesn't really have value if you hire someone to do your performance report for you. It's really something you've got to go through the labor and work of putting it together yourself. And we've got quite a bit of interest on our website with 19,000 unique web visitors last year. Some new elements in this year's report: we've expanded our target setting method to a 4th program. Last year we implemented a new target setting method for 3 programs. It was a systematic approach for setting targets where we linked the target development to the resources available for each region and each division with using cost factors, so that the targets are now a function of resources and the time it takes to complete individual tasks. So the majority of our permitting and inspection targets now are based on that systematic approach, and we'll be expanding that in future years. We've automated data pulls from some of our databases. This is really not something for the public. It's kind of invisible or transparent to the public, but it's good for us in that it reduces some of the manual work associated with crunching the data. We've got now a direct connection with 2 of our databases to the report. It reduces errors, it saves time, it makes it easier to update the report on a more frequent basis if we want to, and we want to expand that as well. We've added some additional report cards on trends, and for the number of permits conducted over time, number of permits issued over time or reissued, and the number of inspections conducted over time. And I think Rafa's going to show you some of that as we go into the report. We've added 26 new TMDL outcome cards, bringing the total to 61 TMDL outcome cards, and we'll show you an example of one of those as well and how that works, and that speaks to that criticism from the Stanford Woods Institute remark that I mentioned earlier. We've enhanced the navigation for one of the tabs where we're trying to highlight the summary information and also retain the ability to drill down into the data so that if you want to get to the details you can, but you're not mired in a lot of information coming at you at one time, and we're going to expand that enhanced navigation to other tabs in the future as well. And then lastly, we've added some high-level information on funding source by program. We've always had the resources by program in the report, and now we've added funding source at a high level. Challenges, ongoing challenges with the report. First and probably foremost is data. We're pulling data from 3 or 4 main databases here at the State Board, plus a lot of decentralized tracking that's done at the program level. So it's always been a challenge. We prefer to pull data from centralized databases, but it's not always available. The data quality and the consistency of the data is definitely improving, but there's still room for improvement. Things like late data entry or incomplete data entry still needs to be improved upon. Second challenge, and this is a big one for the regional boards and the state board organizations as well, and it's understandable, but it's ensuring that the report is actually accurately capturing the work that they accomplish. So there's 2 things here. There's the data part that I mentioned, where if the data is not entered into the databases correctly, or if it's entered late, we're not picking it up. So the results aren't necessarily reflective of all the work we've done. It's all the work we've done that's entered correctly and timely. The other issue here has to do with what we're counting and what we're setting for performance targets. We don't set targets. We don't have measures for all of the work we do. So there's some of our organizations that feel like we're not capturing the important water quality work that they're doing, and that's true. We're not capturing all of it, but there's certain diagnostic indicators that you've got to pick and look at. What we need to do is work with the regions to make sure we're picking the right ones and seeing if we need to make some modifications there. But we shouldn't move, in my opinion, toward trying to capture everything that we do. And that gets at the last bullet, which is just focusing on what's most important and not putting out just massive amounts of information where what's important just gets obscured by all of the data in the report.
Have you, sorry to interrupt you, but
Sure.
one of the ways to deal with both the second bullet and the third bullet, in addition to what you said, is through the use of an enhanced narrative, not long reports, but allowing for more explanation to the viewer of what they're seeing, what's important, and how we chose it. Have you had a challenge sort of calibrating how many words that you can put in a narrative when you're also trying to convey a lot of data?
For the targets,
I'm a narrative story girl versus a number girl. She's a number girl. So between us, you know, you're gonna.
Yeah, and when you go through the report, you'll see we recognize actually that people do assimilate information in different ways, and we include tables, graphs for the visual people, and narrative as well. We're not really limited on how much narrative we have to explain, you know, what the results mean, or what we're actually counting, what the measure or the target means. For the performance targets themselves, we have something called regional considerations, where if a regional board, you know, exceeds their target by 300% or only reaches, you know, 25% of the target, there's a space provided where they can explain why that is, and that, you know, they got diverted, there was a high priority that came up, they focused on, you know, something other than what they originally had set out to do at the beginning of the year, that type of thing.
And yes, well, it's true that I am a numbers gal. I also appreciate good narrative, and I'm glad you put the last bullet up here, Eric, because I know that you know that you and I have had this discussion about the information on the performance report, how it could be meaningful and useful, and the fact that there should be a link between the performance report and our resource alignment effort in terms of priorities, targets, and resources. And I mean, the elements are there, but it's, you know, looking at least for me anyway, just pulling up the performance report, it's not readily to me, you know, what the priorities of the state board are, what the priorities of the regional boards are. Instead, you get this spread, almost an overload of information on all of our functions, which are important, but it doesn't truly reflect the priorities. And so a narrative might actually be able to present that more succinctly. So I agree.
Yeah, thanks. That's good input, and you have expressed that to us, and we'd actually hoped to incorporate some of that before today's release. Today is the day we release the report to the public, but that doesn't mean, you know, we have to wait a year. We can definitely incorporate that in the next, you know, couple months moving forward.
I'm happy to help be a guinea pig on how to read this performance report for dummies. You know, where you could do a sort of a guide with links to get straight to sort of the key things you might want to see, so that the more of the general public or the interested public would be able to get to what they want faster.
Okay, we'll take you up on
I've
that.
done that in other places. It's much cheaper than doing a website redo, and it gets people to what they want faster.
Right, that's a good idea. So at this point, I'm going to click on the link. Hopefully it works. Yes, it does. And I'm going to turn it over to Rafa. He's going to show you some of the new features.
Okay, wait a minute. Does it now work on my iPad? It's never worked on my iPad.
Yeah, you brought that up. You've brought that up as well in the past.
Works on my laptop.
You'll have to purchase another vendor's tablet then, perhaps. Unnamed.
Good morning, board chair, members of the board. My name is Rafael Maestu. I work in the Office of Research Planning and Performance. So the report is public. It's now alive, and we have 32 new cards that we incorporated this year, and we are making all the efforts to actually to improve communication and highlight the most important things that we do, but with also the ability to drill down into the data to be able to answer more questions, because it's common that when you present some data, it just leads to another question and another question and another question. So, and we are a very complex organization with many programs and different offices, and the work that we do is significantly different. So we're trying to come out with measures that can be comparable among regions and programs. So, as previous years, we actually reporting the data in 5 categories of functions that we do. We regulate facilities or control pollution. We clean up sites. We take enforcement actions. We provide funding. We allocate water rights. And then we incorporate also a section to measure our own performance as an organization. We have improved the navigation of the report, and basically we've done this with the use of dashboards. One of the complaints that we were receiving is that the highlights were not, presented properly. So here, for example, under the regulate, we are showing the facilities that we have in each one of the programs. And on the right, we have a summary of the actions that we have taken, like the number of regulated facilities, the number of inspections that we conducted, that there were more than 5,000, the number of individual permits that we issue for all the programs, the number of enrollments in general permits, which is much larger than the individual permits, of course, and the number of monitoring reports reviewed. When you click on each one of the programs, it's going to show you the information for that particular program. In this case, for the waste discharge to land program, we have broken down into large municipal facilities, smaller municipal facilities, industrial facilities, and then a place for all the other facilities that don't fit any other of the categories. But here you can see that we did 125 inspections, we regulate 412 facilities, and we issued 22 permits in that particular program. Once you click on that particular card, it's going to take you to the specific card, showing the information. In this case, for example, the number of permits adopted. In the summary, we also have a number of inspections conducted for each program. So as you can see here, the stormwater construction program conducted 1,881 inspections. But you can see the inspection is much more important in that program than in the other programs. We also have number of permits adopted. Sorry. And this is totally new. When we came out with this approach, and I think it really helps navigate and communicate information much better. We also have new cards, like as Eric mentioned before, about, for example, inspection trends in the NPDES program. And these are the number of inspections conducted by year. And you can click on a regional board, and it will show the numbers per region. So in terms of volume, I think it's very important to be able to tell the story, not just statewide by region by region. The other card that I want to share with you, let's go here, is the number of permits, individual permits adopted for the NPDES program. So here we have data since 1983. And these are the number of individual permits, NPDES majors and NPDES minors, that they were adopted each year, and you can see the trend of the work associated with those efforts. Again, we can click on a particular region and see how the region performed in the past and compared to today's performance. And I think this is a very useful tool for the program to evaluate results and measure the workload associated with the activities.
I'm just going to quickly go through and just show you the TMDL outcomes that we started last year and have expanded this year. If you go to the Plan and Assess card, there's a link for TMDL implementation outcomes that opens a summary card here that shows you generally the number of TMDLs adopted. It looks like it's a little far away for me, but I think 197 TMDLs adopted to date, or TMDL projects, and of those we've assessed the status of 61, and we'll continue to expand that. And here we've got the status assessed, what the outcome is. So for each TMDL, we've essentially, for the ones we've assessed, assigned a grade, so to speak, and the grades are TMDL achieved, conditions improving, improvement needed, and data inconclusive. Basically, we're not sure. And you can see, roughly looking at this chart here, for about half of them, either the TMDL has been achieved or we're on the way to achieving the TMDL. And for another half of the ones we've assessed, we either don't know or we're not as far along as we hope to be. And there's individual cards that we've developed for each of these TMDLs that we've assessed that provide a little more detail. So just following up on the last presentation, I wanted to bring up, I think it's actually Region 4, the Cayugas Creek nitrate. I think this is the one. Here we go. So these cards are all structured similar. They're not all identical, but each one starts with a sort of a masthead box here that provides some basic background information on what's being assessed, what the TMDL is for, and then prominently displayed is the status. So in this case, we've got improvement needed. There's a brief summary of the TMDL. There's a quick reference map. There's a description of the water quality outcomes in a narrative format. And then there's a graphic that shows the nitrate concentrations observed versus the TMDL allocations. So for this one, we've got this blue line that shows before the TMDL was adopted, and then this side of the line is after the TMDL was adopted. And you can see the loading from agriculture and then from wastewater. And basically what it shows is that we have seen significant improvements, especially on, well, I would say both on the wastewater and agricultural sides. The wastewater side is meeting their load allocations. The agricultural side, while improvements are being made, there's still some work to do. There's still some work ahead. And then for water quality in the creek itself, we're showing that ammonia is well below the water quality objective or the TMDL allocation, and for nitrate, we're still above it. So just quick demonstration and tying it to that, how we're using the information that's being developed, and we'll update these cards over time.
Now, let me interrupt just quickly, going back to the earlier presentation. Are you getting the information that when they are doing the monitoring in the among the cooperative agencies and the locals, are you getting that information so that this card will look better next year and the year after?
For most of these cards, we're getting the information from the regional boards, who basically, are looking at all sources. For this particular one, we work quite closely with the regional board, and we did pull the reports that were being produced. I'm not sure it was from the EQIP program, but they were ag reports on the status and monitoring information from the Irrigated Lands Regulatory Program data. So I believe so, and yes, we will, as data comes in, update them using everything available.
And the responsibility really isn't yours. It's really Johnny's and others who are working out in the field to make sure that that information is getting to you. So thank you.
Sure. And then just briefly, can you just pull the slideshow back up? We'll finish it out. We've just got a couple more slides. So results on accomplishing targets for fiscal year 12-13. On the left, we've got the results categorized by inspection targets, permitting targets, and then all other targets. And I'm going to look at my notes because it's a little hard to read that. So for the inspection targets, overall, we met 60%. For the permitting targets, 30%. And for all other targets, 45%. And then this bar graph on the other slide, or the slide over here, shows the results by water board organization. So each of the regional boards and then the state water board overall. And you can see there's a fair amount of variability in those numbers. And, obviously looking at the data, there's room for improvement. We definitely can and will do better in meeting targets in future years. I did want to point out a couple of standouts, though. Region 5 and Region 7 both saw significant improvements in their target numbers. And specifically, Region 5, Board Member Dodek mentioned this earlier, they're including information on their performance targets as part of their executive director's reports. Based on Rafa and my interaction with the staff, it's clear that they are very concerned about meeting their targets. We're getting a lot of inquiries. They're looking at our quarterly reports. They're making sure their work's getting counted. Their management has placed a high emphasis on the performance, meeting the performance targets. And, we're seeing it in the results. They were the highest region of all the regions and the state board. Just a couple bullet points. Meeting the targets is important, but the process is equally important. Going through and setting targets at the beginning of the year, checking results periodically throughout the year, closing the books at the end of the year. It's a good planning process. It improves our data. We'll get better over time. Also understanding why we're not meeting the targets is important. There's, a potentially a number of reasons for that. One of the big ones, in my opinion, is probably that we've now implemented this new target setting method where we're tying targets to resources, and it's really tied to cost factors. So it's a matter of refining the cost factors over time to making sure they're right. Part of the problem is we know we're not capturing everything because data gets entered late or incomplete, like I mentioned earlier. Also, always redirection of resources to emerging priorities. That's something that can be explained in the regional considerations portion of the report. And then, the staffing constraints can always be an issue. Furloughs ended now, which will be helpful, but student resources have seen cuts. So just some of the reasons. Even though we, didn't hit 100% of our targets across the board, I won't go through the workload highlights because I think Rafa hit many of these in his presentation, but a lot of work was accomplished, a lot of permits issued, a lot of inspections, a lot of funding provided, 12 TMDLs adopted, and so forth. A lot of work. And then last slide is just next steps where we want to go from here. We want to continue to improve the navigation as we've talked about earlier, and we will use Chair Marcus as a guinea pig as she's offered. We recognize we need to improve the data and align the databases and also increase the automation specifically with SWRCB because that'll save us a lot of time so we can focus on other aspects of the report instead of just the raw data crunching. Aligning the databases, that really means making sure that our public reports and SWRCBs are lined up with the performance reports. That will not only provide clarity to the public, but also help with the regional board staff so they can easily check where they are at any given time. We've got to, as I mentioned, assess the current suite of measures and targets and evaluate, are we focused on the right things? And we'll be working with water board management across the state to get their input and to do that. We want to expand on water quality outcomes. We realize that's what's most important, showing what the actions, what the results of our actions are, and we'll be looking at ways to do that in addition to expanding the TMD outcome cards. In general, we need to improve communication, coordination, and definition so that everybody understands what we're measuring, so that they can meet the targets. And then lastly, and probably most importantly, increase the use of the report information. If we just, continue to put this report out and it's good information, that's great, but the real value is in using it. And we have started to, work with different program roundtables to present the information to them and ask them questions about, what is the information telling you? Are there specific actions that can be taken to address the information? And we'll also be following up by working with the MCC and the program managers here at the State Board. In fact, next month for our October MCC, we're going to have a portion of that meeting devoted toward looking at this information and trying to get exactly at what I just said. What's the information telling us? Are there actions we should be taking? And that's not really work that Rafa and I can do, but that's work that really needs to happen at the program level. So with that concludes the presentation. I want to remember to acknowledge Rafa's work on this. His dedication, knowledge, innovation makes this report what it is. Without Rafa, this report would be very different, not nearly as comprehensive or complete or useful. And also wanted to acknowledge really a lot of people in Office of Information Management and Analysis, but specifically Robert Anderson. He's been tireless in keeping up with our web updates and doing all of the back-end programming that makes all those cool charts and graphs pop and rotate and do all the things they do and keeping the data accurate. And also wanted to thank Karen Larson with OEMA, who's been very supportive and provided us with the resources that we need to make the report work. And then lastly, Katie Landau, who's a new addition to our office, Research Planning and Performance, who's come on and been extremely helpful and really jumped in with both feet to help build this report and get it out this year. So with that, questions or comments or?
I think I'll just pile on the thank you, because I never miss an opportunity to heap praises upon Rafa and now Robert, as well as Eric, Karen, the entire executive team, as well as all the regional board EOs and AEOs. You know, the saying, it takes a village, well, it takes an entire organization to do performance, and you know, we've come such a long way since I was appointed, and there, you know, at the time there was this fear, we can't put this information out there. You know, what will people think of us? They'll use it against us. And you know, the days when I was told that our highest priorities are TMDLs, and we measure success by the number of TMDLs that we adopt each year. I mean, the TMDL report cards that you've put together have definitely shown how we as an organization have changed, and you all have been just a major, incredible part of that. So thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Yeah, I'd like to thank Board Member Tam Dodek and Board Member Fran Spivey-Weber, who were here before me, who really have been instrumental in pushing for staff to pursue this, what I think is excellence. And so thank you, fellow board members, for laying the groundwork. And I look forward to what more we can do in terms of expanding on the principles of communicating outcome. One little challenge I see, it's almost a philosophical question, but we'll hear probably about this a little more today in terms of, you know, when we grade ourselves on performance, or those who we work with grade us on performance, some of these things we've talked about today are relevant. But there are also these other things that might be harder to measure, and maybe the narrative comes into play. But what concept I challenge us as a 9-region and state board organization is on the principle of customer service and responsiveness. It's not all, you know, the number of permits or inspections relates to that. The water quality data and the environment relates to that. But sometimes those who are responsible for funding our programs can point to specific examples of things that may not be happening that could happen more. You know, I'll leave it kind of open-ended. But if you have any thoughts on that, you know, in terms of, are there metrics that you've already touched on that get to this issue of being responsive? I'm interested, or we can talk about that more, and certainly engage those who provide funding for our organization in that discussion. Any thoughts? It's okay, you don't have to answer that.
I don't have any offhand. I see what you're getting at. That's just something, you know, I haven't put any thought into. It's the first I've really heard of it, but it's something we can think about. Rafa, do you have thoughts on that? Or? Yeah.
Yeah, I've done that from the nonprofit world, but you have to do qualitative reviews of sort of statistically significant customer surveys or that client surveys, however you want to put it. But
Chair Marcus?
I was just going to say, I do remember a long time ago when I worked, you know, started at the water boards, we used to have customer surveys that we had sent out, but, you know, it's always kind of, I think, difficult for a state regulatory agency to send out. How'd we do, you know, unless it's
I think that's
Kinda
still
need